unintentional spiritual messages that could be drawn out of a movie about social justice. Hi, my name is Nat Tran. I like to analyze movies from a biblical perspective. Today we're going to look at The 12 Angry Men and why I think it's a great movie that critiques the heart of human nature. The film takes viewers behind the scene of a private jury as they decide the fate of a young defendant. Tension rises as one juror argues for a reasonable doubt. This led to anger, frustration, and personal bias until the group reaches an anonymous vote. The 12 Angry Men is a powerful film that is praised for its theme of justice, logic, and the responsibility of civil duty. But what if I told you that the film also tugs on some vital spiritual truth that rebuttals against empirical and nihilistic worldviews? I think each of the 12 jurors in the film not just reflect the American democratic society, but represents a type of spiritual doubt that prevents them from reaching the truth. I want to flush out the underrated theme of conviction, doubt, and the truth. So through each of the jurors, I want to present for you 11 unique reasons doubters avoid the truth, and show you how juror number 8, the main protagonist, is the voice of reason and the seeker of truth. So let me begin. Juror number 1 is the foreman. He takes initiative in leading the group, but without any real conviction. I consider him the passive doubter. He avoids taking a strong stance and instead tries to keep the peace by claiming to be unbiased. He was gradually persuaded after presented with enough evidence. He reminds me of Pontius Pilate. Both plays a role of a reluctant judge. Both were more concerned about keeping order than pushing for truth, and it shows how people can be in position of authority yet still fail to take a stance for justice. Juror number 2 is the timid little guy. At the start of the film, he voted guilty with the majority simply because he lacks confidence in his own reasoning. He's the fearful doubter. He struggles to form his own opinions and goes along with the crowd. These are the people that don't believe the truth because it's not that popular. It wasn't until others changed their votes that he gained the confidence to stand by his own reasoning. Similar to how Jesus had to confront the bleeding woman for touching his cloak. She lived in fear for her whole life because of her unclean condition, and despite her timid nature, Jesus called her to step out of her faith and reveal herself. Like the bleeding woman, juror number 2 is an example of how even timid people can be empowered to speak up. We're gonna skip juror number 3 because he's like the main antagonist, and we'll get to him later. Juror number 4 is the cold rationalist, methodical stockbroker, only trusting the hard facts without any deep considerations of those claims. He is the logical doubter. His overconfidence in empirical data made him heartless to human emotion and dismissive of any other facts. Who do we know is the famous logical doubter? Doubting Thomas. He was a skeptic because he needs hard physical proofs. Both Thomas and Juror 4 wanted clear factual evidence before accepting anything as truth. Their doubt isn't emotional or malice, it's just fact-driven. Juror number 4 was willing to change his vote once new evidence provided reasonable doubt. And similar with Thomas, he believed once Jesus showed him the wounds. Juror number 5 is the outsider, grew up in the slums. It seems like he knows the truth, but he's hesitant in voting guilty right in the beginning due to social pressure. He's the unworthy doubter. He is quiet and reserved at first, reluctant to speak, possibly because he feels looked down on by others. I would associate his character to Mary Magdalene. She also had a dark past. She was despised by society due to her background. They both know what it's like to be judged by others, and Mary Magdalene was condemned by the Pharisees for her sins, just as juror number 5 feels out of place among the wealthier jurors. And it wasn't until the jurors were judging people like juror number 5 that he spoke up. Both Mary Magdalene and juror number 5 represent the outcast that feels unworthy to come to the truth. A lot of times we think it's our past or upbringing that hinders us from knowing or deserving of the truth. Juror number 6. He's the honest working classman. He's not that opinionated. He values fairness and respect. At first, he believed in the authority of legal system without questioning flaws in the case. He's the loyalist doubter. believing the authority because it is the loudest voice. He doesn't mind the discussion because it keeps him out of work. He doesn't care for the truth, just rather keep busy. He's definitely a minor character, kind of like Joseph of Arimathea, who follows Jesus in the background but never really intervenes until Jesus dies because of his position in society. Both Joseph and juror number 6 were hesitant to challenge authority until the right moment. Juror number 7 is the indifferent and impatient juror. He cares more about leaving early for the basketball game, avoiding the truth out of sheer indifference and self-interest. He's the apathetic doubter. He avoids the truth just because his heart is already set on something more important. It's a classic story of the rich young ruler. The ruler felt like he was doing all the right things until it got personal. He realized that he didn't care for the things of God as much as for himself. They doubt because it would be more convenient for their lifestyle than to believe the truth. Apathetic people like juror number 7 needs to reevaluate their values to see what is most important and stand on the decision with conviction and not apathy. We will skip juror number 8 for now because he's the main character. Juror number 9 is the wise old man. I think he initially doesn't speak up right away due to the fear of being dismissed because of his old age. He is aware of how society overlooks the elderly. He is the insignificant doubter, thinking that others might not take him seriously. This is almost the opposite comparison archetype of Timothy. Timothy was said to be too young for people to take him seriously. Hello there. Hello there. Somebody wants to come say hi. It's Jasper. Jasper? Okay, very good. They both wonder if their perspective matter. These are the people that might dismiss the truth because they feel like it's not worth having that conversation. Paul reminds Timothy, do not let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example. Once juror number 9 was given a chance to speak, he was able to use his wisdom and experience in life to persuade others of the truth. Juror number 10, he's the most prejudiced member in the jury. He is loud, bitter, and openly racist. He refused to see the defendant as an individual, but dismissed him as guilty based purely on stereotype. Juror 10 represents the willful doubter, someone who refused to see the truth because it challenged their deep-held bias. Instead of questioning his views, he doubled down on them, even when everyone else moved towards the truth. I think juror 10 shares some similarities with Saul. They both were stubborn in their resistance of truth, both had deep prejudice, both clung to their false belief despite growing opposition. And sadly, unlike Paul, juror 10 did not have a radical transformation. I would argue that he never truly changed. He gives in only when he's completely outnumbered. But I think his heart remained hardened. In this case, he's more like the Egyptian pharaoh than Saul. Juror 11 was the immigrant. He trusted the justice system more than the others. He held deep respect for the American legal system, almost to the point where he was hesitant to question authority. He assumed that the court and the witnesses and the process must have been fair, so he had no problem voting guilty. He's the blind doubter, assuming the system must be correct, so he puts in no effort to think otherwise. This was also the case with Nicodemus, right? He was the Pharisee, the religious leader who respected Jewish law and tradition. This made it difficult for him to accept Jesus right away. People like Nicodemus and juror 11 must realize that justice doesn't always mean blind trust in the system, but true wisdom comes from questioning and thinking critically. Juror number 12, he's the jokester. He's the slick advertising executive who is more interested in keeping things light and superficial than deeply engaging with the case. As an advertising man, he thinks in catchy slogans and surface level ideas rather than deep critical thinking. He rubs off as the shallow doubter. Okay, someone who doesn't deny the truth outright, but avoids deep thinking and critical questioning. He also changes his vote multiple times, going back and forth depending on who's the most persuasive in the moment. I think Peter is a great example of someone whose faith is strong in words, but weak under pressure. Like juror 12, he was influenced by the crowd and went back and forth with his faith, denying ever knowing Jesus. Both Juror 12 and Peter before the crucifixion was like seed that fell on the rocks with no depth and no deep roots. These types of superficial characters are easily distracted and don't see the seriousness in knowing the truth. And now back to juror number 3. I think he's the main antagonist. He's the most aggressive and emotionally driven juror. He let his personal experience cloud his judgment. So I think he represents the bitter doubters. Those who doubt truth because of an unresolved pain in life that cloud their judgment. Because of his emotional nature, his character was driven by anger and frustration than reason. The Bible gives us a parable of the return of a prodigal son where the oldest brother would not celebrate because he felt betrayed and overlooked. His bitterness made him blind to the truth. Like juror number 3, he held on to personal pain instead of seeing the bigger picture. Truth is the hardest thing to see when you are blinded by personal bitterness. Number 3, this was more than just a case. He's fighting his own inner demon. So it was through confronting his pain that he was able to acknowledge the truth that the defendant was not guilty. Juror number 8. So now we reach our main protagonist, juror number 8. He's the truth seeker. He's humble enough to admit that he doesn't have all the answers and makes an effort to seek it out. He's willing to doubt his doubts and convince others to think critically, fighting against bias, prejudice, and assumption and personal emotions. You know, I really can't think of a Bible character that represents this type of Christianity better than Christ himself. Both Jesus and juror number 8 stood alone against the crowd. Both are a compassionate advocate for justice. Both challenge others using logic, patience, and moral conviction to lead them towards the truth. And finally, they both win people over one at a time. And you know, it was the gesture of putting on the coat for juror number 3 that displayed great love and forgiveness. Juror 8 is the great example of Christ-like virtue. For it was Christ that said, "If you close the least of these brothers of mine, you have done for me. By your love, they will know that you are my disciple." So the film doesn't end with the announcement of the court case or with the defendant receiving the news, but instead we get a quiet reveal of the juror 8's name, which I think it's a subtle but powerful ending. It emphasized the humanity behind juror number 8, highlighting his role as an individual. Throughout the film, the jurors are only known by their number. By revealing David's name, the film reminds us that we are all individuals that can stand for the truth. These people are more than just a number checking a civil duty. It's important to be known and heard, to fight for morality and justice, standing up for human life and human rights, reinforcing the film's central message: one person can make a difference. The question that viewers are left with is, what is obstructing, hindering, and blinding you from the truth? Lastly, I want to just throw out something fun like the courtroom number, because why not over spiritualize everything? My favorite pastime. The number 228, okay? What does it mean? Now, follow me here. 2 plus 2 plus 8 is 12 for 12 jurors. Also, juror 2 was the antagonist versus juror 8 was the protagonist, showing the duality, two sides of the argument. Of course, I made it up. There was really no true bearings on why they chose this number. Or does it? Reasonable doubt. Bye.